And I recommend that for all sports coaches. I recommend you look into the CLA, is the constricted learning approach. And I'm not going to really dive too deep into it. I debated whether I wanted this episode to be about that. But long story short, it is a way of teaching how to play the game and be effective at playing the game in a way that is a lot more engaging than what has traditionally been taught. And so really what I can say is, a skill is just the ability to perform and execute a movement well, right? And I think a lot of times as coaches and in general, right, we want to teach, right, basketball or baseball as math, right? This is how you do it. This is the only way you do it. And that is super wrong, right? And I can only... You are listening to the Bridging Impact Podcast, transforming leaders on and off the court with host, Coach Furtado. Without further ado, let's dive in. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. Today's guest is myself again. I know I'm running it back as well. So flying solo on this episode, and this is actually the 100th episode of the Bridging Impact Podcast. So I'm pretty thrilled, pretty excited. So thank you again to everyone who is a weekly listener. I'm trying to be as consistent as I possibly can, posting every single week. I know I missed the newsletter last week, but it's just really important to me to get a message out to you all for, one of the things that I realized before we dive into this episode's topic is, I am in like year 5 of coaching, and really the last 2-3 years is when I've really become like a professional coach, right? Where this is what I do. This is what I eat, sleep, and breathe pretty much. And I love doing it, and I recognize I have a gift doing it, and I want to keep doing that. With that being said, I am only one person, right? And I want to make sure that I'm spreading everything that I'm learning from other podcasts, from my experience onto you, another coach who can go make an impact on other kids, because I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm realizing, especially like business wise, is, I can only be so many spots, right, at a time, right? I am a high school basketball coach. I have a new high school job at Pacifica Christian, and as a JV coach, and, I'm also BTG. I have training, so I can only really be in so many spots, right? And so one of the things is now that I feel like I'm not necessarily quite there. I don't feel like necessarily I'm the new coach on the block anymore. I actually have some experience. I can kind of pass it along. I am not the 20, 30 plus year tenured veteran coach. I'm not that. However, I do feel like I can provide a lot of value for, coaches that are starting out, or even coaches that are wanting to continue to learn and innovate, because I've learned a lot. I'm a very, I guess you can quote unquote say, progressive coach. I have a lot of different, my philosophy is, especially in the basketball world, how I train is a lot different than what is traditionally taught and traditionally trained. And my sessions are a lot more fun and engaging than I would say 90 to 95% of other, practices and trainings are. And, kids are getting results. So I'm obviously doing something right. And I want to share that with you all, because I want to, in this episode, I'm going to share 3 ways to make practice more engaging. I feel like my purpose now, right, I've created Bridging Impact as an opportunity and a vehicle. We want to make an impact on as many kids as I can. And going back to my point, I can't be everywhere, right? There are a lot of other great coaches out there as well. And I feel like this is a great platform and opportunity for me to kind of share the wisdom that I've been learning, what has been working, and maybe what has not been working as well, if I'm on another solo episode later on, just to help you, right? To help you so you can help more kids, because that's 100% why I'm in this business. I'm guessing that's why you're in this business, is to make an impact on kids. So let's kind of dive into it. 3 ways to make practice more engaging. Number 1 is just going to be your energy and your connection with the other athletes. So let's talk about kind of the energy part of things. And this is something that, obviously you're not going to have the same amount of energy every single day. You're going to have different things that come up in your life. I am right now learning from a coach who actually I had on the podcast, Coach Steve Hodge, who is the varsity coach at Pacifica Christian. And funny enough, this podcast actually helped me get that job. So if you're looking to kind of network and make your way into the coaching world, actually, I highly recommend you start a podcast. that's a side note. One of the things is I've, got to chance to work with him the last couple of weeks, and I've, connected with him and saw him coach a little bit in February as well. And one thing I can say about him is he is consistent as hell, right? He's so consistent. You know the energy, you know the expectation. So every time you walk in, you see that coach, you see Coach Hodge, right? You know the expectation. So if you can be consistent with your energy every time you walk in, right, you set the tone for your practices. And that's something that I'm continuing to work on, trying to set the tone every single time, right? Because if you go to the and I'm guilty of this, right? This is something that I've been working on being consistently better at, is if you go with the energy, right, of the kids, and then you lower your energy, then you're lowering the standard for everyone, and that's not good, right? I'm not saying you should be completely unaware of your teenager, your kid's emotions. That's not what I'm saying. Sometimes you do need to meet them there, but sometimes you need to grab them and pull them up. I mean, they're not going to be all the way up, but you need to grab them up into the middle, and that's your responsibility as a coach, and that's something I need to get better at, and I am working on. I'm getting better at, and I would rate myself as doing a lot better the last month, but always room for improvement. The number, I'm still going to include this in number one is connection. Every single time you got to acknowledge the person in the room, and how does this have to do with making an engaging practice, right? That's an engagement, right? Every single time someone steps into your space, right? Whether it's a training session, whether you're a trainer or you're a head coach at a high school, it doesn't not matter. They step into your space by you acknowledging them. They feel safe. They feel like they belong. And that's a first level of engagement. It's so simple, right? I give high fives, right? If I have time, I ask how they're doing, how their day was at school, right? We don't always have that much time. You maybe don't even have time for high fives, although I would highly encourage that. I feel like every coach has a time to give their kid a high five or a nux or daps or whatever it is. So that's number one. Your energy and your connection is going to be vital and key if you want to set the tone for a great and engaging practice. Number two would be compete, right? And so one of the things is, this is for people that are in the basketball world. I really recommend you go and look into Transforming Basketball and learn about the CLA. And I recommend that for all sports coaches. I recommend you look into the CLA, is the constricted learning approach. And I'm not going to really dive too deep into it. I debated whether I wanted this episode to be about that. But long story short, it is a way of teaching how to play the game and be effective at playing the game in a way that is a lot more engaging than what has traditionally been taught. And so really what I can say is, a skill is just the ability to perform and execute a movement well, right? And I think a lot of times as coaches and in general, right, we want to teach, right, basketball or baseball as math, right? This is how you do it. This is the only way you do it. And that is super wrong, right? And I can only really speak for basketball because this is my research. You may be 5'11", you may be 6'5". Teaching this 5'11" and the 6'5" guy the same exact move, same exact footwork does not help them out in the game, right? They are completely different players. And so you need to be able to design drills. You need to be able to design what are called small-sided games with constrictions that help each individual basketball player figure out the movement solutions they need to be successful, because it's different if you're 5'11" and quick, or you're 5'11", you're a little thick, right? You're a strong guard, right? Those are two completely different skill sets, and you cannot train them the exact same, right? You cannot train people exactly how you trained when you were a player. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see that coaches make, is they train kids that in a way, right? Or train athletes in a way that they were trained. And it's like, that is going to work for some kids, and some kids it's not, because that's not their body type. That's not how they play. And so long story short, if you make them about competition, right, it brings out the best. If you're just doing drills just to do them, right, it may not be the worst thing in the world if you're trying to get them to learn something, right? Like I talk about going at learning speed sometimes. However, right, if you can get them to compete, play little games, small-sided games, it's going to be significantly more engaging, and you're actually going to see better results in game, right? It may be some of your trainings and practices are going to be messy as hell if you embrace this model. Sometimes I'm like, am I really teaching them anything? But when you go and I'm again going to always bring it back to basketball, because that's my world, is if you watch a basketball game, it's so messy, right? It's so messy. It does not always look pretty. And I'm not saying this is the only way to coach. This is just a way to make your practices more engaging, is to have more competitions, use small-sided games, and please look into the CLA and transforming basketball if you're a basketball coach. And my last point will be to have your teaching points in 30 seconds or less. I see a lot of times coaches give a ton of excellent information, right? It's not like it's bad information, but we have to remember, even I'm asking myself, right? There are a select few people who I can really, some people have the gift where they can keep you engaged and locked in for a ton of time. And if I'm going to be honest, that's not me as a coach, right? I am better in situations where I'm given 15, 20 seconds of information and boom, that's it, right? Quick teaching points. And you don't even have to do it as often as you think. I'm going to kind of build on my point in talking about in 30 seconds or less and just asking a question instead of telling them, right? Get them to think and be reflective, right? That way they feel like they're a part of the process. They're engaged in their learning. They are a part of it. And so, that's going to be your big three right there to making practice more engaging. If reach out to us on Bridging Impact on Instagram, or myself, Coach Furtado, on Instagram as well. If you have any other ways, we'd love to share them in our newsletter of ways that you find that are effective and engaging in practice. So I'll read through them. Your energy and connection is number 1. Compete small-sided games. Look into the CLA. And number 3, teaching points in 30 seconds or less, plus asking questions. Thank you all for listening to this solo episode. Appreciate you all. If you feel like there's a coach or a teacher that would get benefit from this, just shoot it on their way. My goal at Bridging Impact is to impact as many kids as I can. And at the end of the day, right, you are working with kids directly. So please understand your responsibility. We are shaping, nurturing, and impacting the future generations, and it takes one coach at a time. Coaches have such a significant impact. So continue to take that, obviously with responsibility and with love. And so appreciate you all. We will be back in store with an episode for you all next week. Coach Furtado out. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Bridging Impact podcast. We'd love it if you would like, subscribe, leave a comment and a review on whatever platform you're on. It's the best way to help us grow. We appreciate you for doing that. We'll shout you out on social media. I'd also love if you connected with me on social media. Let me know your thoughts. And this is why I do it. I want to share knowledge and wisdom from experienced leaders to people like yourself and myself, so we can have this dialogue and move forward, make an impact on the world. So stay tuned, stay subscribed. Cheers.